All right, I'm doing this video to talk about Stephen Jeffries' playwriting book. More specifically, I'm going to talk about the structure portion of the book. So structure is basically the backbone of playwriting. And since novels, according to him, since novels can do a lot of interior dialogue and narrative to move the story along, structure is more important in plays than it is in novels. Talks about Chekhov a lot also. So he breaks down the structure as being important in how tension builds and how the audience experiences the journey. The audience experiences the journey. It's like they feel the bones of the story when they are experiencing the structure. They know when it's off, they know when it's not familiar to them, and it is a excruciating experience if you're watching a play and the structure is not there. So some of the notes that I have for structure as the foundation, I have that structure creates momentum. Properly structured play can move the story along, and moving the story along is very important for rhythm and pacing purposes. Also, if you're dealing with structure, Jeffries says a lot of things that other people have talked about when they talked about writing stories in general. He talks about the index card method, where you can take the different scenes. As you know, scenes build into beats. Beats build into scenes, and scenes build into acts. He also talks about 3-act structure, and he talks about 4-act structure. Until reading this, I didn't know about. He uses Macbeth as an example, but he also talks about why. He talks about the arbitrarily placed intermissions and act breaks, but he also talks about why the structure is the way it is. It's supposed to be a climactic point of the story. And also you have to structure your story around the rising action. Like the first act stops with a climactic point, and of course the next, or the second act needs to end with end with a climactic point, but the dramatic tension is supposed to be greater as you go along. And when he's talking about structure, he also talks about location, scene location. He talks about the difficulty in switching from scene to scene to scene to scene to scene. As far as the locations are concerned, he talks about open and closed spaces. He talks about methods. You start one place, which is the home, and then you go to another place which is supposed to be like the upside down world, or different, or you throw some different stuff in there, some complications, conflict, things of that nature, something that's unfamiliar to the characters, and then you return back to back home on the third act. This is just for the 3-act. He also talks about the 3-act structure being kind of old, but I like it. He also talks about the 3-act structure being, let me see, I wrote some notes down here. Talks about the 3-act structure. He brought up the magician's trick. The 3 acts of a magician's trick. which is funny because I was watching Christopher Nolan's Point of Interest. I mean, not Christopher Nolan, but Jonathan Nolan's Point of Interest. And of course, they made a movie. One of the brothers made a movie called Prestige, and it reminded me of that. But he talks about the 3 acts. Oh, he talks about the pledge, where you show them something, the turn, where you do something extraordinary, like making object disappear in the air. And then he talks about the prestige and bringing it back. And he talks about how we are wired to receive things in 3s. And he says unconsciously, but that you can't be unconscious and notice something. I think he meant to say subconscious. We subconsciously look for that 3-act structure. So it also talks about thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, which I never thought about it like that. That's just a pretty cool way to put it. And it's always helpful to look at these in different ways, cross-referencing things. Speaking of cross-referencing, I did look up Jeffries, and very, very interesting fact about him. He mentions that he wrote The Libertine, but he doesn't really tell you exactly what he wrote the play, and then he went to Hollywood and actually wrote the screenplay, which I think is extraordinary. And it was nominated for 8 awards, British awards. It was really good. The movie didn't do that well as far as the box office was concerned, but the box office was, they had a lot of different variables going on there. But Johnny Depp played the lead role, which was pretty cool. All right, so another thing that I noticed is in other books about structure, we talk about the scene and structure part. So you go goal, conflict, disaster for the scene, and then reaction, dilemma, decision for the sequel. And Jeffrey talks about the reaction and not being predictable, and he talks about being innovative in your no structure and everything, but you also want to be original, which I thought was pretty cool, because that's what he did in The Libertine. He talks about an instance where one of the producers or people that put money into the film criticized this inciting incident, which is how you start off a play. It's the first change or a thing that puts everything in motion. And he said that the Earl, or the protagonist, met the woman that he would fall in love with because she was on stage in a play, and they thought that it would be more feasible to meet at a party. How many times have we seen a romantic comedy or a play? People meet at a wedding or a gathering or a bar or something like that. It's just trite, overused. So that's one of the things I took from his book also. I mean, he really pushes you to be innovative, but you have to take that with a grain of salt, because Jeffries is an experienced professional. I mean, he's been to Hollywood. He's done plays that have been produced. So even in reading this book, when I actually looked him up on IMDb, I had to kind of go back and look at the book a different way, because this guy's speaking from an experienced, largely, really impressively experienced point of view. But if you're learning structure and you're learning story writing from a novice perspective, and I think he mentions this in the book, you really have to learn how to create complex characters, and you have to learn structure separately. And then you have to learn how to synthesize them when you're structuring your play, because basically a lot of the stuff that your character does, the development that you have and the interactions between your characters, the action, reaction, the beats, they're going to inform your structure. And if you have to move things around so that you can still have the rising action, or you can place your climatic incidents in the places that they need to be in to make the play progress, and not just be flatline piece of work, then yeah, you have to know, you have to structure with the character development and their interactions and the relationships in mind. Okay, so I wandered off. He also talks about something that's very specific to this book that I thought was pretty cool. Was he talked about the 9 stories, which I've seen the book on the 7 plots in the bookstore, and thank God I never bought it, because he totally trashes that book, and he says the person is not experienced as far as a some kind of convention or thing going on. He trashes it basically, and he gives us these 9 story archetypes, which is pretty cool. So if you don't remember anything, or if you don't take notes on anything else in the book, you should pull those 9 story types out and just learn those. So also he talks about I don't know. I was glad that I picked the structure portion on purpose, because a lot of the things that I've done in the past, as far as going to conventions and going to seminars, I went to Robert McKee's seminar in New York and California, and gone to screenwriting seminars and taking classes, and the closer you get to literary work, the more they emphasize character, creating complex characters and vivid scenes and places and things of that nature. And they don't really talk about structure that much. You know, a lot of people want you to move away from the outlining, but no one really gives you an answer on how to structure things. So I thought this was pretty cool. So the 9 stories, it's pretty good. Oh, he also talks about, when structuring something, he also talks about the rhythm and pace of your story, how you have to be very wary of not keeping a certain rhythm, and not keeping a certain pace. And he also talked about having a dominant scene that you're working toward. And he also uses his own play, and he uses a couple of examples to show, like, if you're doing something that's common. I think he uses David Mamet, Glengarry Ross. If he says, if you're doing something that's uncommon or unfamiliar or original, that hasn't really been seen before, you want to stick to the classic structure. And if you're doing something that might be maybe a well-worn road of a story type, then you can use a more experimental structure, which I thought shed light on one of my favorite directors and writers, Quentin Tarantino, because I always wondered why he would do experimental structure in Pulp Fiction, but then he would do Django, or he would do Inglourious Basterds in straight linear fashion, and that explains it. Pulp Fiction was a very original and crazy story, even if it was told in a linear fashion, but it is a crime story and it's easily understood. So you can play with the dramatic structure of that. Whereas something like Django that was something that we haven't seen before. I think everybody's thought to do I don't know what that was, a horror, slave, revenge, pulpy type movie. Same thing with Inglourious Basterds. So it was a linear structure, so you didn't have to figure out too much about it. Memento. Like I said, I've been watching Nolan stuff, Jonathan Nolan stuff lately, and Memento was a very simple story, but it was the linear structure was 10 tampered with so that it could be more interesting, and it did make it more interesting. All right, so I wrote notes about complex motivations, realistic characters, and layered with motivations, including internal conflicts. Jeffrey emphasizes creating characters whose goals, fears, and desires intersect and clash with others in interesting ways. Oh wow, that's 15 minutes. Okay, so yeah, I haven't scratched the surface on my notes. I get into like a lot of scene construction, the 9 stories framework. 5 minutes is not enough to go through. There's a lot of information in this book. Organizing themes and motives, engaging the audience with your structure. I talked so much about the 3-act structure, I'm sorry. You have the episodic structure, you have the circular structure, you have the experimental or non-linear structure, break away from traditional formats, often define expectations. That's one thing he talks about. He talks about not being predictable and not grabbing the first thing off the top of your head as far as action, reaction, beats, or scenes that you want to do. You want to, something I heard somewhere else, you probably want to jot down 10, 15, 20 different reactions and pick the last one, or one of the last 5 that you come up with, not the first couple. Also talked about Chekhov's use of subtext, where he talks about a lot of Chekhovian structure choices and drama, which I usually like to cross-reference and do a lot of different things before I talk about something. And I didn't get the full understanding of what Chekhov was doing. I mean, I read what he said about him, but I didn't get to look at the plays. But it says that the hallmark of Chekhovian drama, it serves as a powerful tool if you want to learn how to layer and nuance your work to make it more complex and interesting structurally. So basically breaks down the essential components such as exposition, kind of bad, you know, stay away from too much exposition, conflict, climax, resolution, so foreshadowing and playoff, those are also structural tools. Purpose and tension. See, a lot of this is structure, but if you don't know how to use the character development and the drama to create tension and the emotional and thematic payoffs, then you won't be able to take full advantage of what he's talking about as far as the structure. And even the archetypes that he lists out with the 9 stories framework. So I would say character development and significant events needs to be probably thought about first, and then you think about the structure, you think about the shape. He talks about it as a shape. He talks about delineation also. You know, you have to have a beginning, middle, and end. And delineation is just kind of knowing where your story takes place. And not one of his examples, I mean, he uses Macbeth, which some good examples in Macbeth, but he also, a lot of the stuff he talks about, man, you think of this play, well, it's not a play, they made it into a movie, but it came from a play called Doubt with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Meryl Streep. And when he talked about delineation, I thought about, wow, you know, Doubt was 2 people sitting on a bench, and it was I put it on a whim, and I couldn't take my eyes off of it. It was they did so much with the dialogue. I mean, he told a whole story with the dialogue. It was extremely well done. And then when you talk about delineation, I think of Tennessee Williams and how, you know, Cat on a Hot Tin, I think it's Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. It seemed to examine the lives of lots of different people in a short span of time. And of course, our example that we've been reading, Death of a Salesman, that works on so many different layers. And you know, they say not to be preachy or not to be didactic or I forgot the word for being too political or what have you, but gosh, it was good. I mean, it was really a examination of capitalism. It had good complex characters, and the structure was not limited, because I always think about a play and I think about not going back and forth in time, but Jeffrey says you can do it, can be done, and Death of a Salesman shows that it can be done, even if it's by like a ghost, or you're doing like a small beginning, middle, and end, and then you're bringing in backstory and you know, other characters and developing them through dialogue. Also, he talks about using structure as far as spring, fall, back to spring, as far as your structuring, and that he talks about how different sets and things could inform and also show a pattern or a rhythm or a structure that the audience will also pick up on. Okay, this is running too long. I have much more to say about this, but I'm gonna leave it at that. And I think the last thing I'm gonna say is one of the things that I really think about is whether to outline or not to outline. And you know, a lot of people say do not outline, and Jeffries really goes into what an archetype is, and how these are not formalists, but they're story forms that people intuitively get in their bones. They get the rhythm and they get the you know, like I said before, with the 3-act structure, people are inclined to receive things in 3 parts. They're familiar with that. And I know that from my own experience. Sometimes if I can't catch a rhythm, or I can't catch a outline, not an outline, but if I can't find the structure, if I can't feel the structure and I don't feel safe in the structure or where the story is going, then I just leave it alone, even if I like the characters. So I guess that's the thing I'll leave you with, learning how to I keep wanting to say outline, but learning the forms and learning how to instinctively move your story around so that you have the climaxes and you have the rising action, and your beats and your scenes are properly placed for the maximum effect. And also so that you're giving people, and this is a time-tested philosophy, that stories, even your most original story that you have, is gonna kind of be placed into the container of something that came before. So the structure and the story form is already there, and maybe even some of the subject matter and content is already there. And you're putting your original story inside of that. Not to say that you're gonna mimic the structure, but the structure is gonna have to be something that we're used to and something that we feel in our bones that we can follow with, or else nobody's gonna watch your play or read your play. So I'll stop there. Thank you.